working, learning look like for adults with autism spectrum disorder, with adults underlined. The statement is adults with ASD are introduced to fewer options of support as they and their primary caregivers age. A campus-style living community creates a safe place for these adults to live, learn, work, create social interactions, and ultimately feed back into society. So what is autism spectrum disorder? It says it in its name, it's a spectrum, but the main 6 different syndromes are ADD, OCD, Asperger's, ADHD, ODD, and the classic autism. So these are just a quick overview of what this all entails, and just a quick mind map of what they go through on a day-to-day basis. So looking at the future or the past of history and mental asylums, we have Dorothea Dix in 1830 starts up the American Mental Asylum, and she was for the celebration of research and looking at the research and how can housing help these participants. At that time, the systems and the research wasn't there, and so the materiality and the aid wasn't able to, they weren't able to help these participants in the way that we see now. As we move through history, we see the Kirkbride plans by Thomas Kirkbride. That leads to a more widened view of floor plans that acclimates itself to more nature centered, but still not bringing in more than just living requirements. So I took from these precedents different words that I didn't want to use in the design. So some of these words would be lack of nature, constant stimuli overload, visually closed, unorganized. So creating a database of words that I don't want to use when designing for these participants. As we move into the 20th and 21st century, we see more and more organizations popping up in how we want to start designing for these participants, creating more nature-friendly zones, breakaway areas, more learning and social interactions throughout design. So looking at these precedents and using the verbiage like I did in the past, but using these as positive design language. Using nature or visually open, social interactions, and helping me design or create a more longer list of design language that I want to work with later as the program progresses. I then wanted to break out the user experience into 3 different environments, living, learning, and working environments. This then coupled with the secondary environments aid in this user's experience in the genus loci of the space. So how does this user interact? How does this user connect to the space? And all of these are words that combine to make these environments great for this user. And I wanted to show a quick diagram of how if one of these isn't met for the participant or the user, that more of the hierarchy breaks down for these environments. So it's crucial that we design for all basis of these different environments. So I broke this project down into a few goals that I wanted to then design for. The first of which is the scale. So creating safe and approachable buildings that want to be viewed, entered, and experienced. Second is the material, utilizing neuro-friendly materials in various ways to promote a safe and recognizable space for its users. Third, spatial qualities, curating spaces to encourage growth for the end user experience and help them focus on the task at hand. Relatability and connectivity, fashioning spaces that are recognizable and allow the user to connect to the spaces, thus enabling the user to open up freely. And lastly, resiliency, creating spaces that are adaptable to the user and able to change easily when used. So taking all of this knowledge and trying to derive a site I decided to go with north of Denver due to the fact that it has great research, it has great implementation, and great celebration around the site. So in the realm of research, you have the Anschutz Medical Campus that is very close, and they do a lot of work with research and just creating more diagnosis and how to diagnose these participants and what goes along with that. Then we have the implementation, which is the in-home therapy care and therapy and beyond, which does a lot of great work for in-person therapy. And then lastly, the celebration of ASD in the museum, the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Museum, and also the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Training Center down in Colorado Springs. As we shift over to the right of the slide, we can see how close this is to the necessities in City Park and downtown Denver. And I wanted to be close to these, not only for off-site stuff, but also a bus station can take you to all three of these necessities very quickly. And I thought that was important since not all ASD participants drive. So as you can see, there's a bus station that goes very close to it with the bus access icons. So creating a site that connects to that very easily is something very important. Another thing to note is the Colorado Front Range Trail that goes right below the South Platte River. And this is something that a lot of people use that I want to gain access to and make sure I have access points to the project. Then the building heights, I wanted to make sure, since these buildings around it are very large, I wanted to make sure that they still have the views to the mountains, but also are able to see a beautiful sight down below. As we zoom in, I took these accessibility points and drew primary and secondary lines or access routes that I could then design to unobstruct these motion lines or these accessibility lines. So with that, I took then my earlier environments and put that on the site, working with how do I want to lay out the site. So I kept the living and learning sites more private and down to the south. You don't want these participants just open to everything. And so creating this pocket of privacy, but then as you move north of the site, you have this working environment that then creates a more community focused and user focused site. With those bubbles, I then created these forms that still have the unobstructed pathways. And then this creates my final site. A few things to note. For dependent, I wanted to create this caregiver lounge that is accessible to the dependent living areas that are able to access these participants if something were to arise. As you move south, you have the independent living that is accessible by the parking lot, where if they need to drive, they can drive. As we move down to the site or down the site to the therapy center and office space, this is where they can come get their therapy, but off-site participants can then feed into this as well. And then I wanted to create this bridge to bridge the gap from the private to public spaces. So this bridge separates in the middle of the site that then opens to this expanse of the community garden and the food hub. This would be something where the participants, the ASD users could then help with the community garden and then feed into that food hub, which then feeds the community around it that they could come in and buy stuff from. So we continue going north on the site, and you have various things that the community can use, but also the ASD adults can use on site that I will be getting into later on. Quick breakdown of the housing. I wanted to keep this more orthogonal and more, orthogonal, where it's more relatable and easy to recognize for these participants, with a few shading devices with triangular shading. As you'll see, the triangle will come back in, but these spaces in this houses will have a bedroom, play sensory room, bathroom, living room, kitchen, study room, and storage utility room. And creating this these puzzle piece-like structures, I wanted to show how this micro community can come together. And through this section, you can see the private living, but also public living, and how these ASD adults, how they interact with each other in these different places. And then as we move to the therapy side, I wanted to still have that orthogonal, but more focus on that triangular pattern, where they're not just going to another hospital or another therapy center, but it's something different that they can go and experience, and it creates interesting spaces outdoors. So as you can see on the bottom side of the screen, you can go and be underneath this folding pattern. And this is a quick section of how that space is created with this folding pattern. Then you have the working side with where the food hub is. This would be separated into a greenhouse up above, and then a food prep down below that then could be moved into the selling vendors. And then there would be an eatery area outside close to the park. And so that would be then very closely connected to the outdoor gardens, community gardens. This is a quick section of how the flow of food would be. Up above would be the greenhouse. Then it would go to the prep and cook. And then it would go out to the selling vendors and to the sitting and eating area. Here's the overall campus, just showcasing the different movements or the different spaces that are created by this. In this view, you can see the triangular pattern kind of morph its way around the site and connect these buildings. As you can see a little bit more on this, it has some in the housing as well, where it's not just a disconnected site, but it's more, this kind of brings the site all together. And then here's this river walk or waterway that participants are able to stop on that bridge and look down that waterway with wildlife going on. This is a quick section of looking down into that greenhouse. The tennis courts, the playground, which would be ASD friendly, and these panels would have educational things for this participant to use, and different friendly ASD materials and environments for them to connect with. This would be the pavilion, the community pavilion, still using that triangular pattern for the community, but also the ASD to also help aid in that community aspect. And then this would be the outdoor workout facility, plus that running track. I then wanted to go over a few participants and individual profiles and how these individuals would use the site. So I wanted to take different ethnicities, different age groups, and different needs. So Jonathan is 37 and he has classic autism disorder. Tony is 56, he has Asperger's syndrome, and Samantha is 71 with Rett syndrome. So this is a diagram of just kind of showing how the site would get used. So they would all have therapy needs, so they would be able to trickle down into their therapy and go to their different therapy options. And some of the needs or interests would be either basketball, and they could go to there. Samantha likes to work in the garden, so she works at the food hub and the community garden. And as you can just see the bus stop is getting used and how that community pours into it. So the red is the community, where they can go to the bus, come to the site on the bus stop and filter into the site. And so this is just a quick diagram that I really enjoyed looking at, because that bridge really brings this whole site together, and just portraying the different paths that each person would take. For the people that aren't in person or on Zoom, I wanted to show what models I made. This would be the site and the overall scale of different things that I'm working with. The architectural model is showing more of the forms and, like I said, the spaces that are created throughout the site. And then the last model would be the chunk model, and how we're taking just the housing and looking at their living requirements on the house. So different sound canceling or heating or ventilation methods to create this comfort environment for this participant to live in. Lastly, I want to say my closing statements. I believe a campus-style living community creates a safe place for these adults to live, learn, and work, creating opportunities for social interactions and cultural connections between peers to drive them to success in their surrounding communities. Since this is a thesis and ongoing study, I would like to, if I had a chance in the future, to start looking at testing on larger and smaller sites, so taking those environments and seeing how it would work with larger or smaller sites to further explore interiors beyond floor plans and how do their living environments correlate with their exterior environments, and then further explore materiality, since that was one of my goals I didn't get to as much in this thesis study, so further exploring that. And then lastly, explore more intuitive design options for buildings on the site. So how does the interior work with the exterior and different stuff like that. So that is my ongoing thesis. Thank you for your time. Thank you. Questions and comments?
I don't know if someone on Zoom is allowed to start.
Maximize this.
No, there you go.
There you go, yeah. In case you can keep your
There you go.
presentation there in case you want to.
Sweet. If anyone wants to talk, they can.
Are you able to hear me?
I think your presentation was super fabulous.
Thank you.
I loved the diagram of all the 3 different people that would be using the site. But I think one thing that has been occurred is like, I don't know what a
Sure.
So like explaining what each type of autism disorder is would be really helpful.
Definitely. Cool. Anyone on the computer on Zoom? Hopefully you guys can hear me.
Are you able to hear me?
I can hear you. Can you guys hear me?
Hello, hello, testing, testing, 1, 2, 3.
Yes. Yep, you're good. Logan.
Okay, cool. Really great presentation, Alex. The whole time, well, not the whole time, but especially towards the end, I was kind of realizing that, you know, maybe what started as a really human-centric sort of material approach, like you were talking about at the end, wish you had gotten to more of that.
Sure.
I think that, you know, it would have been great if you could have gotten to that, but it was just as valuable seeing how you were laying out this, you know, community that would be easy to make very insulated and, you know, introverted in a way, but you were really focusing on how you could get it to connect to the city, not feel like it's sort of its own little enclave that you can't come into if you're not a member of the club, and that people who are living there don't maybe feel like they are able to leave. So I could certainly appreciate your effort in site design planning, and you're looking at it at a really high level. At the beginning, your diagramming was excellent. I think that your storytelling and really framing, you know, what you consider the problem to be and the specific ways you wanted to address it was really effective. I think any, you know, quality thesis to be able to do that has to be able to say, you know, what the problem is and exactly how I want to tackle it, because there's more than one way to, you know, that's why it's the practice of architecture. We don't know the right answer, but we're trying, right? So I really appreciated that. The one thing that I would push back on, just from a design point of view, would be the decision to have the what you called on like the main site plan diagram, you call it the water runoff. I guess I was curious if you could explain or explore more why you decided to split up the working and the living, when right now it seems to be all about work-life balance. Does splitting it with, I guess, an untravelable barrier, except using a bridge, how does that fit in, I guess, with trying to make it feel like a cohesive community?
Sure. And so that water runoff for the waterway was actually already there. And so I was kind of using that as a design area to kind of elevate. And also I think it worked well to split up those, since I wanted the working environment to be able to be accessed by the community. And so if it was close, it wouldn't be as private down below, if that makes sense. And so that's why I split it up a little bit more.
I think that's a great reason. I mean, back to what you were talking about and what I was kind of pointing out was like, how do you let the public know that they're welcome there? That's a great way to do it. You need a little bit of space there, not only for resident privacy, but also for people to understand that they're welcome to come in and,
Sure.
and take part. So that was a great explanation and a really, really strong thesis. Good job.
Thank you, Logan.
I can go ahead and follow up. Thank you for your presentation overall, Alex. It's a really, really interesting topic. I think what's interesting about it from an architectural point of view is that it feels more like a planning exercise almost. The scale of it is huge. You're designing an entire campus. And so I think, right off the bat from the project, you have that argument of like, this is something our cities need. Like we're going to build an entire campus and this is how it's going to be useful. And, totally on board with that. I think it becomes a difficult question of where to take it from there. If you're saying, how are you adding to the dialogue of campus design, through this project? And I think I start to see it through like the panels that you're adding with like the triangles that go through the campus, and that creates that like repetitive pattern that I think you were talking about that becomes like this sort of wayfinding understanding where you are, if I'm understanding that correctly. I think it's moves like that where I start to kind of link your focus of like maybe what this problem is and how this unique campus design is accomplishing it.
Sure.
So I think those moments are when it speaks really clearly. And then I think it's already been said, but the diagram of how that space is being used is then really helpful because I start to understand, okay, that campus is designed, very specifically for this purpose.
Thank you.
I have to hop off at 4 o'clock, so I'm just going to throw one more thing in there based on what Max said. Yeah, I think that your diagram with your precedents was really interesting because you were not only just showing a precedence and then visually or verbally explaining like, oh yeah, back then they treated it like it was a mental institution and obviously that's not good. And now today we let daylight in and that's obviously great. You were really pulling out things that were deeper than just architecture on that timeline. And so I wonder if at the end, it'd be sort of a nice, instead of having a closing page with your verbals, you back that up with an image of your project on that timeline now.
Yeah.
And you say, here's the takeaways of my project. Like I'm furthering this conversation, just like, all these other people before me have been maybe trying their best, but in hindsight, it's 2020, we always know we can do better.
Yeah.
That's all I got to run, but great job.
Thank you, Logan. I definitely had that in my head to do. I just never got around to doing that. So thank you.
No problem. Have a good one, guys.
You too. Anyone in person?
I want to add to what Max said. It's interesting because you and I have talked about this for a semester. I guess it didn't really hit me, but you've designed a whole site for a whole community because you've got recreation, you've got living, you've got, places for healing, right? You've got activity with the garden and the producing of food. This is pretty close to self-contained, and it's pretty remarkable. And I think Max kind of talked about it, right? What are you doing as far as like campus design that's new? I never thought of that in our conversations together.
Mhm.
But you've accomplished something that I don't think most students can even aspire to do, quite frankly. And that's really impressive. That's really actually pretty amazing work when you kind of look at it in hindsight. I'd say you should be commended for that. Hopefully all the Tysons that are on Zoom can, appreciate that.
You guys hear that?
They're all muted and all, whatever, they're bad students. Good job.
Thank you.
Congratulations, really well done.
Thank you.
You know that my favorite part is the housing,
Mhm.
and it's done very well, great floor plans, simple, effective, no inefficiencies, nice outdoor spaces. They seem like walkable and enjoyable areas. So in that sense, along with a lot of other things, I mean, the gardens, the bridge, a lot of this stuff comes together really nicely.
Thank you.
I have questions. So going off of that, like that is very self-contained. Have you thought about, I guess people can be really mean and there might be a stigma that this is the area where people with mental health issues go. And so have you thought about how it's integrated or maybe into like the larger context of Denver, or maybe the whole point is that it is this haven and it's not integrated and that it's separate? And have you responded to maybe that question at all? Or?
Yeah, I think I thought about that at the start, and that's why I wanted to, like I had in the environments bubbles shown on the campus, I wanted to create more a private space for these individuals, but also they're able to then, if they do feel confident going into the community, they have that then site that is very close that they can feed into and the community can feed into. And if they do feel uncomfortable in that environment, they can then easily move back into that comfort of that bottom south side.
Kind of like a gradient.
Sure, yes.
Basically.
Yeah, so you have private and then kind of that food hub is in the middle where you can work at it as an ASD adult, but then the community can feed into that. And then it's very community centered up on the north part of the site. And I know this isn't a end all be all for adults with ASD, but I think it's a good step in recognizing that issue is out there, and how do we start to talk about that, and how do we combat that stigmatism, like you were saying.
I think that these points that you are discussing, are tied with the past presentation, and this notion that some people have, that, okay, these people with this disability or these people that are homeless, we need to hide them, and put them around the corner where, so that was the discussion just for the homeless people. So I totally appreciate, that approach, and as, as Cesar was saying, so you needed to create the whole thing to be able, for these people. Because still, in very informal conversation that appears, the notion of saying, hey, these people with no houses, and so there was a comparison even to what is normal, right? Incredible, in 2022, we still discuss normal.
Sure.
Incredible to me. But, so I really appreciate that you did the whole thing, so it's like here, even you are inviting the society or the people in the neighborhood to come here, right? So there are spaces for them to come and visit.
And I think that was definitely a driver of the project. It's not just housing that they deal with, but it's also learning and living. And so I think that's why it drove the campus.
Because we ask, and we discuss and we read, right? And these huge words are all the time, currently you see them all over the world. And I find that interesting that you found that architecture can be not just a building, but can create this situation, can intervene, right? And can motivate people to be social. What that means. Because it will be easy, to communicate to people that speak our own language, or they know our own culture, or they like the same food we like, and all that. That's an easy thing, but it's also boring, I would say. It's very interesting when you do not know and when you, right? So when you learn from others, I find that more interesting.
Sure.
So I appreciate that that was the most important thing, to bring people to here, to these people. not just go.
Yeah.
right?
Definitely.
Congratulations,
Thank
Alex,
you.
on completing this project. Very good.
Thanks.
I just was thinking about the book now. I'm sorry. Just think
Don't
about
bring that up.
Next up, right? Don't bring it up. I really think it's very interesting when you do a project like that. You start to discover techniques that and I think I want to just echo that one diagram where you took the people and I wonder what's the potential of that diagram in the sense of, can you take that into the house? Can you take that
Sure.
into the
Yeah,
building?
definitely.
And you make it three-dimensional?
This one right here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And can there be a diagramming technique that works best for your population than for architects?
Definitely.
What
Yeah.
might be the way to do it for your population? And this is basically movement. I wonder if there is a equal diagram of staying, as opposed to moving, like where people stay and for how long. But really, you just started an interesting language that could be really good to sort of explore as a discovery from the project. And how would you then start to respond to that analytical language? And is there a analytical language that's most suitable to your population?
Sure.
In terms of that. And then what might be the response? Like, it sounds like that diagram emphasizes the bridge, right? Like it just tells you like,
Definitely.
wow, the bridge is so important.
Yeah.
And then starts to bring out some questions, like, should the bridge have more things? Should it stay the same?
Sure. Yeah, it's more of an iterative
It's kind of like
process.
our staircase, right?
Yeah,
Our
definitely.
little ornamental staircase. And the question is, should there have been a place to sit on that staircase? But maybe if you did that, it takes away from actually the quick sort of contact. But I think if there's any discovery or something that seemed to be coming out that is beyond just any other project, it seems to be this device. But I think the device needs to be evolved to maybe for your population and evolve to see, how can it be useful for designers? That might be the discovery of the whole project.
Sure. Sure.
Because ultimately the report is, okay, so what? It's the so what question. Okay, you've done all this, so what? And the so what is your contribution to the state of the art. And then so consequently is like, what are you offering other people after all this really, really hard work? And I know I saw you in that studio all the time. So, so on one hand, congratulations. And it's really just a start.
Thank you. Are we done at 4:10 or 4:20? Oh, it's 4:20.
Our next
isn't it?
is
4:20.
4:20.
But when you still have,
Yes.
So you
10
need to
minutes.
finish like 5 minutes.
Kaylee, did you have
I
something?
was gonna say, I totally agree with Otto with the master plan and like bringing people onto the site. The amount of amenities that you have and the way it's oriented with the food hub, like, I don't think it'll just attract people, but I think it could be like a destination of the city. Like the food hub kind of reminds me of like the Boston Market or like those places where people go to eat and like socialize. And I just think it's a really successful plan, especially when it comes to that bridge, that divider between like the occupants that are living there. They have the choice to like be exposed to that versus.
Sure.
is this in Reno or?
Yeah, Reno, River North District.
Okay.
So just north of the baseball stadium. Yeah.
And I don't know other student that has worked. Because I'm taking work. It is always.
I don't want to talk to you, Anna. I'm trying to get stuff done.
Yes, I remember that was the answer. I need to send, to finish it, but it shows now, how much you work. But
It's always shown.
yeah.
The fact that you have more freedom to work at home or work here, what's happened over the last 2 years has really challenged all of us and each of us in our own unique ways. I second and more than that, knowing that if I needed to reach you, I knew where to find you. you know, hard at work at studio, when you did not have to be there. Again, I will commend you on that as well. I have a feeling that there's a lot more to this in the future, you know, whether it is the work, the process, or the effort, the strong effort. And who knows, maybe even after a 5-year degree, there might still be another degree or two ahead of you. Who's to
Who
say?
knows? Who knows?
Who's to say? You combine a lot in here, architecture and planning and social empowerment. Very well done.
Thank you.
I'm gonna go to another review.
Thank you,
And
Caesar.
starting, thank you for the work. And I think starting from something is beautiful is always a wonderful thing. So I wish, you know, you always start from that point, you know, trying to see architecture as a tool, not
Sure.
as a solution.
Definitely.
That's great.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Cool. Thank you, guys. For the people on Zoom, I don't know if you want to see my section model.
There's my section model, and it comes apart, and you can see inside
Turn
of it.
off your screen sharing so we can see it closer.
Oh, yes.
Now you can see it.
I got it. Can I hold something? I got it. There you go. I was pretty happy with this. I wanted to show more people.
But there's that, and then here's my whole setup. I have the